Anatta, or Atman in Sanskrit, refers to the absence of a permanent and changing, independent individual in the world. The concept suggests that the notion of self is merely a continuous aggregation of the five aggregates. According to Buddhist philosophy based on the theory of dependent origination, all phenomena in the world lack independent, substantial essence. In other words, there is no permanent, independent, self-governing self-soul. Most people believe in the existence of a true self, thinking that all actions are performed for this self. However, both the body and the mind are in constant flux, much like a flowing river. Just as each moment in a river is different from the previous one, is the river of this second the same as the one in the last second? If it is, it changes every second. If it's not, it is still continuous. Human life is similar, neither constant nor discontinuous, rather a continuous and similar succession. In essence, the concept of self is elusive, as described by the Buddhist principle of no self. Consider yourself now and yourself in childhood. Are they the same or different? From an external perspective, they are entirely different. Modern scientific theories suggest that all cells in the human body are replaced within 7 years. Internally, many thoughts and perceptions have also changed. Thus, the self is a concept created by the mind, essentially a collection of the five aggregates. Buddhism advocates the idea of no self, asserting that the firmly held self is merely a temporary existence composed of countless cells and ever-changing consciousness. Every individual's consciousness contains both good and evil, impurities and purity. The practice aims to eliminate these impurities and attachments, to lose a part of oneself, and attain liberation and enlightenment. Early Buddhism, as discussed in the Nikaya scriptures, emphasizes the doctrine of anatta. For instance, impermanence is suffering, and all that is impermanent is without a self, and this form is not self-made, nor made by another. It arises due to conditions and ceases when conditions cease. According to this perspective, everything in the world is a result of various elements coming together, not a fixed, unchanging, independent entity. Houses are aggregates of bricks and wood, and humans are composed of the five aggregates form: sensation, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. In such aggregates, there is no permanent, unchanging self, hence the concept of no self. No self is divided into two categories. 1. No self of person's personal emptiness, claiming that individuals are aggregates formed by the combination of the five aggregates, lacking a permanent, independent subject or self-soul. 2. No self of phenomenal emptiness, stating that all phenomena arise from various causes and conditions, constantly changing, without a permanent controller. While Theravada Buddhism generally asserts the no-self of persons, Mahayana Buddhism goes further, claiming the emptiness of all phenomena and the inherent emptiness of the nature of things. Everything is considered as illusory and transient, in line with the principle of emptiness. No-self is a state of wisdom, an internal realization of the emptiness of all phenomena without confusion, hindrance, or fear. Through systematic practice, relying on teachers, learning, contemplating, and cultivating ethical conduct and concentration, one can ultimately attain this wisdom. No self does not imply the non-existence of oneself, but rather the elimination of attachment to the concept of self. Only by understanding no self can one attain Buddhahood. No self is the realm of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, not a prerequisite for personal actions, but a goal of spiritual practice. Due to the lack of realization of no self, sentient beings engage in the path of practice. The concept of no-self in Buddhism involves selflessness, unconditional giving without consideration of personal gain, and the ability to embrace a larger perspective. Understanding no-self leads to letting go of the ego, merging into a larger identity, and consequently gaining more. Practicing no-self involves generosity, joyful giving, and sharing with others, fostering a sense of interconnectedness. In Buddhism, no-self is about self-dissolution, completely disregarding one's concerns and external praise, honor, or affirmation. It is acting without attachment to one's position, wholeheartedly giving without expecting anything in return, and maintaining a detached attitude afterward, like a boat leaving no trace in the water. This is the state of no-self. Various masters provide explanations for no-self. The term self has two meanings. 1. Self-reliance, without depending on conditions. 2. Domination. In reality, nothing exists without depending on conditions, and nothing is entirely self-determined. Therefore, Buddhism discusses no-self. No-self does not mean non-existence, but helps negate erroneous perceptions of oneself and return to the true nature of life. Understanding no-self allows letting go of the small self and merging into the greater self, resulting in abundance. Realizing no-self enables practicing generosity, joyous giving, and sharing with sentient beings, leading to a sense of self everywhere. In Buddhist teachings, no-self involves sharing one's personal interests with all sentient beings, transforming individual benefits into collective benefits. It means considering the welfare of the larger community first, selflessly dedicating oneself to the benefit of others. After helping others, there is no seeking acknowledgement, no desire for rewards, and no lingering concerns about how much good one has done. This embodies the spirit of the Bodhisattva path. When people hear the term no-self, they may find it unimaginable or even frightening. However, understanding no-self requires first clarifying what self means from the Buddhist perspective, and then realizing that no-self is a factual concept. The goal of Buddhism is for everyone to overcome the troubles caused by self and reach the freedom of no-self. The concept of self has two levels. 1. The selfish small self. 2. The compassionate, altruistic big self, equivalent to the religious or philosophical concept of the divine self. No-self can also be divided into two directions. 1. Based on personal experience, feeling that there is no self both within and outside the mind. 2. Based on the Buddhist standpoint, practicing the concepts and realizations of Buddhism to understand the interdependence of existence and emptiness, the simultaneous presence of being and non-being, and the non-duality of self and emptiness. Observing self closely reveals that it doesn't truly exist, yet it is pragmatically useful. Firstly, the self is a combination of material and mental aspects. According to the Buddhist perspective, the self is the result of the combination of the material body and the mental mind. Without the body, the self would be like a lifeless corpse. Without the mind, it would resemble a ghost. From the perspective of the material aspect, everything is made up of atoms and molecules, constantly changing. In the past, scientific research was not advanced enough to understand these processes, leading to the belief in a permanent, unchanging self. However, with advancements in scientific knowledge, it becomes evident that the body, including the brain, undergoes constant change. Every cell in the body is replaced over time, and the molecular composition of the body is in a state of flux. From the perspective of the mental aspect, the mind is also ever-changing. Thoughts, emotions, and consciousness are not fixed entities, but dynamic processes. The mind is influenced by various factors, including external stimuli, experiences, and internal conditions. The concept of an enduring and unchanging self is challenged when one examines the nature of the mind closely. Secondly, the self is a product of causes and conditions. According to the Buddhist principle of dependent origination, all phenomena arise due to causes and conditions. The self is not exempt from this principle. It is a result of various factors coming together, including biological, environmental, social, and cultural elements. These factors shape the individual's identity and contribute to the formation of the self. For example, genetic factors play a role in determining physical characteristics, while environmental influences contribute to personality traits. Social interactions and cultural conditioning also shape one's sense of self. The self is, therefore, a composite of these causes and conditions, and it lacks an inherent, independent existence. Thirdly, the self is a conceptual designation. In Buddhism, the concept of emptiness (kunyata) is crucial to understanding the nature of reality. The self is considered empty of inherent existence, meaning that it does not exist independently or autonomously. Instead, the self is a mental construct, a conceptual designation created by the mind. When individuals reflect on their own identity, they often have a sense of continuity and coherence that gives rise to the concept of I or self. However, this sense of identity is a mental construct, and the designation of self is based on a collection of changing attributes and experiences. The conceptualization of self is a convention that facilitates communication and interaction, but does not correspond to a fixed, unchanging reality. In summary, the Buddhist understanding of no-self challenges the notion of a permanent, unchanging, and independent self. The self is seen as a dynamic and ever-changing process, a product of causes and conditions, and a conceptual designation. The realization of no-self is not a denial of one's existence, but a profound insight into the nature of reality, encouraging individuals to transcend egoic attachments and cultivate wisdom and compassion.